Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the City of Cleveland Heights Council Public Safety and Health Committee. It's March 18th, 4 o'clock. I'd like to call the roll. Chair Jim Posh here. Vice Chair Councilwoman Larson.
Nope. Oh, yeah, I guess I am.
We will turn that into an affirmative.
I'm here, yeah, sorry.
Council Member
Another meeting.
Cobb.
Here.
And we have President Kuda here joining us. We have a relatively short agenda. We are here to start with to talk about the Cleveland Heights Comprehensive Equitable Safety Action Plan, the CESAP. We have Director Zampf, who's going to present with Ken. Why don't you show us what you have?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having us here. We're really excited to talk about this. I think this is a great effort and, continues our transportation planning efforts that we've been doing over the past year or so. But also, I think even more so than the active transportation plan that we spoke to you about in December, this one has some real lasting processes that we went through, including a really good TAC, Technical Advisory Committee, which is made up of people that you'll see in a few minutes that were really helpful in bringing this along. We also had a really good consultant team, Kimberly Horn, so we want to give thanks to both of them. But I'm going to turn most of it over to Ken to walk you through why we did this in the first place and the structure of the plan, and then ultimately what's inside of it.
Yeah, so the funding for this came out of the Safe Streets for All program, which was part of the IIJA, passed in 2021. And really there's 3 different grant opportunities within the Safe Streets for All program. There's the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan, which this is. There's the planning and demonstration activities, which we'll touch on in a bit, and implementation grants. We were awarded $200,000 action plan grant in 2022, and they note that the plan should develop a holistic, well-defined strategy to prevent roadway fatalities and serious injuries. So really safety for all road users is at the heart of this plan. And like Director Zampf mentioned, Kimberly Horn and Associates were the consultancy that we selected. So what's in this plan? This kind of outlines the different chapters, and we'll get into each of them, where really there's a safety analysis, how we engaged and got information from the public, equity considerations. We know equity's in the title of this plan, so that's definitely drove a lot of what we are doing. Then we'll get into the policy and process changes that are suggested out of this, the project selections that are suggested, kind of some of the progress and transparency, and then also in the plan there's a bunch of appendices with more detail than you'll probably ever want to look at. But it is there. There's like 150 pages of extra information, charts and tables for you to look at. Quick timeline, we began kind of at the end of January of last year, where we met with the consultant. We started developing kind of our timeline of what we were looking to do, who we wanted to bring on as stakeholders, and kind of setting up what benchmarks we wanted to hit to get this done. Initially, we were trying to hit the August, September deadline because that's when we thought implementation was going to be. That ended up not being the case, so we were able to extend the project out a little longer, which allowed us to not rush and get some more feedback from people and dig into some of the core things we'll talk about. So this was kind of an initial hopeful idea that we got there, and we got pretty close on a lot of this. A lot of this ended up lining up with what we initially set out for. So again, the first big chapter is the safety analysis part. They looked at crash data for the last 10 years, from 2014 through 2023. So there were over 7,000 recorded crashes in that time frame. And unfortunately, 20 of those were fatal. And one thing that really stood out was that 11 fatalities were just in the last 3 years of that study. So definitely a downward trend for us as far as overall safety. And we know that that's consistent with what other cities were seeing, kind of a little bit part of the pandemic, It's hard to tell exactly why that's the case, but that's certainly concerning to us that there's certainly a trend towards more fatalities. than
Ask a
ever.
question real quick.
Oh, sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ken.
Yeah.
Do those fatalities include those pedestrians?
Yes, this is pedestrians and car crashes, all of that's included, and we'll touch on some of that.
Thank you.
So when we started to dig into that, we kind of divided it into two different clusters of data. We looked at clusters of fatal and serious crashes, and we came up with kind of three areas that had some consistencies, both geographically and kind of conditions. So we have right outside of City Hall at Taylor and Mayfield, which I think we're all pretty aware of. We also had north of Monticello, kind of the Noble neighborhood. There was a series of fatalities and high injury crashes. And then the Cedar Lee district. And then if we're looking at just bike and pedestrian crash clusters, and again, the red dots and the yellow dots on there are the serious and fatal ones. We noticed Cedar Lee, South Noble, Coventry, and Cedar Fairmont, which makes sense because that's where we have kind of the highest amount of pedestrians. But we also know that these are close to libraries, schools, so we need to pay extra attention to these areas because we know a lot of children are walking as well. As Director Smith mentioned, we had a really good group that we formed for the Technical Advisory Committee. We met every month for about an hour, 30 minutes to an hour, and they really helped review data, helped get the word out and get people engaged and out to the meetings. A ton of input, stuff that we wouldn't have thought of without their input. I know some of them you are familiar with. We had people from, of course, internal staff, but we had NEPs from the county who's doing a lot of work on the active transportation side. Folks from the schools, the libraries, of course, police and fire, as well as bike advocacy folks as well. And not only do they help form this plan, we're also going to be looking to them to help monitor and put pressure on us to make sure that we're following through with everything that comes out of this plan.
And just to add in, they really, from jump, they really expressed this desire to stay involved. They didn't want to just be an advisory committee and then walk away. They want to be as part of the implementation, which we really like to hear.
Okay. Engagement, collaboration. So we had a number of different events, but we'll start with we created a website. People could go onto that website and sign up for emails that would inform them of events. It also give breakdowns of what happened at the events if they couldn't attend. It'd give us timeline, kind of what the whole program is about. It's a really good site to break down everything that has happened and what we are striving to do. One of the things that really worked out well is we partnered with Seventh Hill to create a street team to help get more engagement and really in particular neighborhoods such as Noble, try to get more people out on the street to try to round up more people than we've had in the past with other planning efforts.
And just to add to that, this is a really cool concept. So what the street team is that Seventh Hill actually hired local people. They paid them from the Noble area to be our street team, to be our people on the street to try to get engagement. And there's a couple of these things that were the direct result of that.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, the Noble Fest, we didn't have city staff there. We had them go out and they led the efforts there to collect input. And same with our youth workshop. Grace, who was on the street team and is involved with the school, she got the youth team together and got a lot of feedback that we probably wouldn't have got with other adults in the room. So it's really good outreach that we just normally don't get in other avenues.
You set a model.
And then there was 2 open houses. The first of those is to kind of get ideas of where we wanted to see improvements and kind of just general feedback of things. The second one was had people ranking some of the ideas on some of the corridors, so we could kind of pinpoint what people are looking for and what they would think is most effective. There was also a public coordinate map that was a GIS-based piece of software or site that allowed people to put in their ideas, anything from where they thought a bike lane should be to where maybe a near miss occurred. I know I put a number of those in. And we know that those near misses, while they aren't captured on crash reports, they do influence the way that people feel about the safety of a street. So even if people aren't getting hit, well, that's good news. If they're still not feeling safe, we want to capture that and know where those locations are. So that really helps in that.
And we also, this last bullet is, this is why I think we had a good consultant, because this was not part of their scope, but we shared with them any sort of traffic and safety related interaction center complaint that we got, and they were able to, reflect upon those. They couldn't address everything, obviously, but at least that was another data point and a way to engage sort of informally to get information into the room.
Yeah, I'll read directly from the report. The most persistent of the themes reiterated by the public whenever they were engaged was the immediacy of the need for safety improvements. Residents were emphatic that the city should be implementing safer countermeasures as quickly as possible. So again and again, we need to do something. We need to do it quickly. Again, equity consideration. We know that at least in the previous administration and part of the Safe Streets for All program was to look for serving underserved and underrepresented communities. So there's a lot of data in the report of what we looked at. So if a project or an idea fell within those, they were scored higher and received additional input. As mentioned, we had our street teams out in those areas to try to get a little more input than we normally get. So there was a number of policy and process changes. I'm just going to highlight a few of them. There's many more than just these. This is a representation of some of the things that are in the report. So look at evaluating and potentially lowering speed limits. As I think many of you are aware, we do have the Urban SDK software that we're using to monitor speed and traffic volume on streets. And that's helpful for when we do implement traffic calming measures. We can get pretty quick feedback on whether something like that's working. So if we do want to mess around with the speed limits, we know some of the areas where we're seeing speeding and target. Pedestrian push button access and maintenance. We know that there's a lot of issues with where the button is located. We've also talked a lot about leading pedestrian intervals, which again in DC, that's on every street. You have a leading pedestrian interval and it makes a big difference having that extra 2 seconds to kind of get out before the traffic. Adding and improving lighting, which we just spoke about earlier today with Dr. Botan. Also consider multimodal and any and all infrastructure improvements. We heard again and again adherence to the Complete and Green Streets policy, try to make sure it has some teeth. And we're actually adhering to that on any projects that we do. Updates to zoning codes for new developments that require sidewalks. And then for you guys, continued investment in neighborhood traffic calming.
And I'll let you in on a little secret. Sometimes you put things in plans that you can take credit for. So the zoning code changes that council adopted earlier this month, or maybe it was last month, already require sidewalks. So we can already take credit for one aspect of this. As far as project selections, we had a table that we referred to, which took in crash history. Well, it took into 5 categories: safety, equity, public feedback, connectivity, and climate. And each project was scored based on these different categories. And I know it's a little hard to read here, but we looked at prioritizing the ones that had the higher ranking. So we talked
through how to rank these, what should be weighted, how those weights should be. And this is the feedback. They're both segment and point projects shown. As mentioned, that second open house, we got a lot of was where a lot of the public feedback came from for the weighting. So that's where we presented actual ideas on select corridors. And in the big table that you see in the plan, those are divided out to short term, long term, medium term, which is usually more expensive, less expensive, and everything in between.
Ken?
Yeah.
So the point scale, is that part of the legislation? Is that something that this team came up with?
It's something that the team came up with.
Okay.
Really similar to the active transportation one, pretty similar metrics that were used there.
Okay.
But it's not a bad system for us to use as we evaluate things going forward in our capital projects, for example.
I think that makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Some of the highlights of those projects were for bike lanes or path on Lee Road, Mayfield Road, Taylor Road, and Monticello Boulevard. Those were the top ranked ones for the segment issues. And for the point ones, leading pedestrian intervals at Cedar and Lee, probably throughout the district. High visibility crosswalks in the Noble neighborhood, so kind of that north of Monticello area that had a number of those pedestrian crashes. We think high visibility crosswalks would be great there. Implement no turn on red at Cedar and Lee. I know the active transportation called for no turn on red throughout the city, which again, NDC is no turn on red at all signals. Again, that was nice to see. And they also note high visibility crosswalks on Coventry Road, or higher visibility than what is currently. And there's dozens and dozens more, but these are just some of the top ranked ones. So kind of our transparency here, the CSAP is posted on the city website. And we don't want this plan to just go and sit on a shelf. This should be treated as a living document. So as we collect more data, as we start to implement things, any changes that we make in the city, we want the plan to reflect those changes as we move forward. For this project, there's an annual monitoring report that's required to the feds. And we want, as Director Zamp mentioned, we want the TAC to be involved in anything going forward, have their input on what projects we should go after. This is a little hard to read, but so of course funding is a big thing. So if we're looking at short-term projects, a lot of those can be done through either the NOACA street supplies, or those are fairly cheap projects. We can maybe even self-fund those. For medium-term projects, we can look to some of the ODOT grants, such as the HSIP, the special bike and pedestrian solicitation. Man, I get these. And a number of other ones, and long-term, looking for those big federal grants and other ODOT grants. And of course, any local capital funds that we could get to help fund some of this would be great.
And we listed HSIP and special solicitation because those are two that we actually have submitted on already. So can you just want to talk about them briefly?
Yeah, so the special solicitation one is on Noble and Warrensville Center, and that'd be looking to do a road diet with bike lanes and some other intersection improvements. So a pretty transformative project. We know it's something that's been asked or recommended through the Eastside Greenways plans that we never did. It's also recommended in the active transportation plan and this plan. So it's something that we went after.
How much are you asking for?
I should have wrote that one down. I think that was about 2 million.
Yeah.
2
Okay, so
million-ish.
large enough to make a difference.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
this is looking to do essentially everything that the plan was looking for. So,
Is there a match with that?
I don't remember on that one. I know on this next one there is
Okay.
a match. So the HSIP we submitted, and we're kind of working through the last little couple bits of that, but we've sent in the preliminary documents to ODOT. They're just waiting on a couple minor things from us. And that one, we're looking to do Lee Road crossing improvements. So looking to do raised crosswalks throughout the Cedar Lee district, improved lighting, refuge islands, hardening center lines, some leading pedestrian intervals, anything to help give pedestrians not just a sense of safety, but actual physical barriers to vehicles and kind of a safe place to go in between.
Yeah, the lighting thing comes up over and over again. I would assume at the meetings that you held in the neighborhood meetings that came up a lot, you know.
Yeah, and one thing specifically that we're looking to implement here that I've asked for is a new type of lighting device that's starting to get some traction, and it's based on the push button, and instead of being just the flashing beacons, you would have a light that lights up the crosswalk itself
Yeah.
when people are traveling. So I think that's kind
That
of
makes
a nice improvement that the studies show helps drivers.
Now, is it CEI who does our lights? You know, the street lights?
It's First Energy.
First Energy. So, First Energy. You know, I know the mayor had been talking to them about how the lights don't seem to make it all the way. You know, have you had any discussions with them about?
So we just had a meeting today with Dr. Boateng, the sustainability coordinator, about the Leopardo project streetlight component of this. So that's definitely in play. First Energy is not the easiest utility to deal with,
Yeah, that's what I hear.
but apparently Leopardo has a good working relationship with them. So we're hopeful.
So isn't the plan to have all the streetlight heads replaced in the next, as part of the Leopardo project, which basically means in a year?
And today's meeting was about prioritization for those LED conversions and making sure they're the right color and softness, because those LED lights can also be harsh sometimes. So it's that sort of, let's get the project kicked off at these priority corridors areas and then move to the residential areas next.
I see. But I guess I'm trying to get a handle on the scope. Is it for every single traffic head or traffic light head in the city, or is
Not
it
traffic, streetlights. So
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
The streetlights.
I think it is.
Yeah, essentially every overhead light and those kind of city-owned, like you see along the ring road here,
Right.
they kind of have that special pole that isn't really the overhead light. So anything like that would be included. It wouldn't include necessarily all of them on parking lots, but I think it would probably end up being that.
Yeah.
But really, those overhead street lights are the first ones to go after.
Is there like a standard degree of Kelvin that you choose so it's a more of a warmer light as opposed to a blue light?
Yeah, that was the talk with Dr. Boateng. I think you should probably ask him.
Yeah, that's not our
information
area.
about those.
But just interestingly, there were one or two comments about that on this plan, so we made sure that the team included some verbiage about that on there, because we know that was
Okay.
important.
And I will note that illumination of the crosswalks that I was talking about, most of those are solar powered, so we wouldn't necessarily have to be tied in necessarily to the electrical. You can also tie in if you want, but we don't have to sit around and wait for that. We can install those without that need.
So without taking you off track, so you tell me to pause and wait if necessary.
We're almost at the end, so you're good.
So the HSIP monies, that is monies we have today?
No.
Or monies where,
So both of those are ones we've applied or are in the process of finishing up the application to. So we don't know if we've been awarded them yet. We're hopeful.
so there's, not that I want to call out one area in the community, but the Cedar Lee area, you you have multiple overlapping bubbles for street safety as well as pedestrian bike safety. And I think I understood that the HSIP grant deals, it is special for the Cedarly area, is that?
Yeah, that's where we focused it on, and a lot of what this particular program looks at is sidewalk and pedestrian crossing improvements specifically. So that's why we chose this grant to go after for this kind of treatment. It can't necessarily fund a bunch of bike lanes. This is pretty specific to the type of things that we were already looking to do in Cedarly where we know there are issues. So it's not going to solve everything that's on the list, but we do think it'll make it a lot safer for people walking in the district.
And the good thing about HSIP is it's a annual program. So it's something that we should apply for every year. And number two is the call that Ken has had with our regional, or I guess our district representative, was really positive about our project being sort of above and beyond what they typically get.
Yeah, I think he was excited that we're doing something that's more than just sidewalk extension, which is what a lot of these end up being. That we're trying to do something that's pretty transformative in an area. So
It's
something
holistic.
Yeah.
It's a big picture.
So when do you find out, like, the scores of these grants and how well you performed with the grant?
I know the special solicitation, we expect something relatively soon because they're rolling applications, so it was going to be sort of first come, first serve, and we were relatively early on when we got
Great.
that in.
That's
And
good work.
There was supposed to be some sort of spring, like maybe March announcement, maybe it's March, April. HSIP, we haven't fully submitted yet because there were two deadlines for that. One was like your preliminary plan, and then the next one is coming up. So I imagine that's a little bit later in the summer, perhaps.
Yeah, so well, the first was like the preliminary, get the stuff over to your district so they can review and give you some feedback. So they've given us the feedback. We're working on finishing that feedback and then we submit by the end of the month.
So I know I'm walking down a slippery slope here for a sec, but I mean, there's members of council that really want to allocate some funding in a budget amendment for traffic calming, specifically things like the NOACA traffic table. I guess we could take this one-on-one offline later, even if you need to think about a response. But because I think the finance committee is going to be meeting relatively soon on this, but I mean, I think that council has the ability to act by providing funding, and it's its way of showing that we think it's a priority. And sometimes, throwing money at something isn't necessarily the best solution, but it's something that council can do.
This project, the estimate from the engineers is 1.8 million. So if you have 1.8 million to give us, we'll take it. But we're hopefully going to go there. And there's a 10% match, up to a 10%. We don't know. It could be as low as 0, up to a 10% match.
So, I mean, let's hypothetically say it's 2 million, we provide 10% of that. And I'm just like recklessly throwing numbers around, so this isn't realistic, but so we fund enough now for what would perceivably be the match that can then go into the bigger project. But if we're gonna find something out soon, if you don't get the project, the monies can be used for some short-term solutions to, get some traffic tables in the road as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
I think generally speaking, it's no coincidence that we bolded and italicized local capital funds, because while we're definitely going to go after any and every grant opportunity, the vast majority of this stuff we should expect to fund ourselves over 5 and 10 years. So absolutely, we would want to have, and it doesn't necessarily have to happen in this moment that the finance committee is considering amendments. However, one of the advantages of this wasn't done in time for the original budget process. We were still wrapping it up, so we weren't able to provide specific recommendations. But now that we're at this point, we could, and probably should, provide some recommendations that come out of this for additional funding for this year. If that's on the table.
I think it is on the table.
Yeah.
I mean, well, I guess we've got 4 council members here. Do you guys have any thoughts?
Have any of these discussions involved aggressive traffic enforcement and aggressive parking enforcement and fines as a way to provide funding? I never hear that
I
brought
would
up.
say enforcement is not the right method. I would say building infrastructure that restricts and keeps people from being able to do the activities that we're wanting to enforce is a much better use of money inside. I'm not saying that enforcement shouldn't exist. We should traffic people that are speeding, but it is not the overall long-term solution for any of these issues.
And I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm talking about it in terms of providing funding to implement many of the things that are on here, because I am not optimistic about federal funding going forward. I think we can probably say it's doubtful. And state funding, it seems that every year the state looks to do what they can to limit the amount of money running to municipalities.
Yeah, I think and there are some policy recommendations about things like enforcement, but we should certainly look at if somebody's gonna be breaking a traffic law or a parking law, let's utilize that fine or that fee towards improving transportation. Yeah, absolutely, that's the right way to reallocate the money.
And I think the last time that I looked at some numbers, we have millions of dollars of uncollected fines right now, going back I don't know how many years.
What's that fund on?
It's several $1 million.
So I mean, just the last job I had, there was a similar situation, and they made a decision to, I don't remember it because it was out of my wheelhouse, but try to pursue those things by hiring somebody to assist in that. And it paid for itself to get those unclaimed funds, unpaid funds.
Can we maybe add that as an agenda item to our finance meeting? Because I think that's more of a finance related issue. Do you think that's appropriate?
Well,
Bill?
because that would require like a collection agency, right? To do that?
I think that's what the organization is.
I mean, we can certainly put it into our discussion. We might not, I'll make it part of my script. So,
And that's gonna be with Judge Costello, I believe, versus anything that the city can do. But that's probably a question for the judge and the finance department. And typically, many of these fines fall on people that at least represent to the court that they're least able to afford to pay the fines.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case.
So I'll include it on my script. I do have 2 questions. You got everything answered?
I did, thank you.
Yeah, please.
There was a time when people in the Transportation Mobility Committee went out and, especially Charlie Mossbrook in a wheelchair, tried to use the push buttons on Leda Road. So it sounds to me like y'all are aware that they're not ADA accessible.
Yeah, and again, that's brought up as one of those policy
Yeah,
recommendations to make sure that we are in compliance.
I'm so happy to see that. And then, question for you. As you implement and you post on the website that you implemented this installation, is there a way that people can comment if it's effective or making them feel safer or anything so that you can get feedback?
I think that'd be a good thing to do. We don't have anything now outside of the MAC.
I do think that, so we can talk here for a second about our demonstration project, which everything Ken heard in DC last week was that anything that's been awarded, it might take some time, but you're still gonna be able to use those funds. So the idea there is not only are we gonna be doing actual demonstration projects, but there's gonna be more data collection and also utilizing the engagement public coordinate thing, which we felt like was really useful in this case. So I think we can figure out a way to get people to react to how we're implementing or demonstrating the recommendations of this.
Thank you.
Are the demonstration projects determined at this point?
They
Generally,
generally speaking,
yes. Yeah, there has to be a design component of this, but we're looking at temporary road diets along Monticello and Noble. And I think a section of course, I don't have the map in front of me. And then there's a number of crosswalk improvements, looking at leading pedestrian interval signalization changes throughout many locations, some no turn on red at certain locations. Things like that, things we can do cheaply and quickly. Also adding traffic tables, chicanes, trying a number of those treatments out on select.
What do you mean when you say temporary? I'm sorry, Ken. I interrupted.
So instead of having it built with concrete, which is permanent, we're talking about things like the speed tables that are on Harcourt, South Taylor, which technically could be permanent, but these are not necessarily concrete,
Okay.
set it and forget it. These are things that could be picked up and moved if we wanted to try it in a different location, or it's not working, or maybe it just needs tweaked. It means that we're not putting it down there to be there for forever necessarily. So a lot of paint, a lot of plastic type of treatments instead of, again, pavement and concrete,
Okay.
those sort of things.
Thank you.
So we do have one more slide, I think, which is really just wrapping it all up.
Yeah.
And of course, most importantly, is we're hoping that council adopts this at the next meeting.
We'll see.
We'll see. But then obviously continuing to look for grants, guidance on priorities. So, the plan prioritized things, we're gonna continue to talk to people, but council too can say, we would like to prioritize this improvement for that one. And then a commitment and support from everybody to implement the projects.
So, as I said, lighting, but another thing that somebody brought up last night at a council meeting, and it's frankly permeated the last 3+ years for me, is, I don't know, I don't know how you could say police presence as part of this safety plan, but a lot of people are saying people are running lights, people are running signs, and you could have all this safety plan in place, and people aren't following the law, kind of throws a monkey wrench into it. So how much of this is coordinated with the police department as far as the planning stage?
Police was part of this, and they'll continue to be a part of it. As Ken said, enforcement is certainly a necessary tool that's part of all this, but the safe systems approach that sort of backs all this up really says is that you actually have to design the roadway so that people do the right thing, because they're not going to do the right thing on their own.
Yeah, if you can design a roadway that's preventing or making it less likely that someone's going to travel fast, that's much better than putting a cop every block. It's
And
much better use of time and
how much are the deployment of the cameras that are being purchased, and what role might they play here? I mean, I could see how they might be able to identify trouble spots, so to speak, that kind of thing, but
You might know a little bit more about the security.
yeah, I don't know the cost of those.
I mean, we have them. I'm not talking about, personally, I'm talking about the deployment of them. We have put hundreds of thousands of dollars, I don't have a number, but it's significantly, over $700,000 into this, but I don't think they've been deployed yet.
Not completely. I think it's a work in progress.
And there are some that are been installed but not activated.
Yeah.
But again, coordinating this with the plan in some way to both identify and, for lack of a better term, police the progress of it.
Yeah.
Record the progress of, how these plans are working that would be one of my priorities, I guess.
It would give you additional data.
Right.
Yeah, to put that with the urban SDK data. But again, I'm always someone that's a little bit less on wanting to be strict on enforcement. So if we're designing a road that looks like you should drive 50 on it, it's hard to necessarily fault the driver when we've built a highway in front of City Hall, if they're gonna treat it like a highway. So while, yeah, enforcement is important, we should probably look at designing a better road to get the result that we want.
But if somebody wants to go right through a red light, which they're just gonna break the law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't really stop them from doing that without enforcement.
I'd love to talk about cameras in the urban SDK, but I think there's gonna be a kind of a follow-up meeting from this committee at some point where we'll be talking about that. You know, I would like to advocate traffic cameras for speeding purposes on some of our roads. But I really need to get a barometer of how staff feels about that, obviously, how our community feels about that. It just seems like we are short police officers. It's hard to hire police officers. The whole role of police officers is somewhat changing. If this is something that we can maybe figure out in some of our roads that we know where there's some egregious speeding, which urban SDK can tell us. I mean, you know, spending millions of dollars worth of work to adjust a road so it doesn't feel like a motorway or a raceway. You put cameras in, it's like what Councilperson Cobb mentioned about how we can get funding from cameras to repair roads. I don't know, there's a lot of open items here. I know we're supposed to talk about this. Is there any objection to not taking this back to the full council on the 7th?
I'm ready to move it forward back to council, sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's the wise choice. Get this approved as quickly as possible. Make sure our community knows about it. Were there any additional public hearings about it? Was there going to be any additional presentations to like a report out to the community with this?
We didn't have one built in because really there had been so much leading up to this, and we gave I think a month's worth of ability for the public to look at it prior to it appearing on your agenda. But we certainly can come to a council meeting if you want a presentation there, or we can talk about specific issues as they are topical, and really move towards the implementation part of it.
Well, I mean, I think it really is a showcase for your work. Does anybody feel strongly one way or another on the committee if they present to council about it?
I would like, especially for you to describe what the projects that you're going out for grant money right now for, because those are really on everybody's mind, and that's what information people are looking for, is will it help make me feel safer in my neighborhood, and so that part of your presentation, and thank you for all this work, by the way, thank you.
If I could, and just to follow up, I think it's a good idea that you let council know what outstanding grant applications are out there when you make them. Because I think 98% of the time we find out only after they've been awarded. I don't know if there's some reluctance because you don't want to get the hopes of the council or the public up that we have made all these applications. But I thought it was informative and telling for me when I saw the consultant contract that we were asked to approve recently that goes after federal grants, how many dozens of grant applications they have sought over the last couple of years and how many they were successful on, because often we're thinking about funding something and it's potentially already in the works.
So I did actually include that in my planning updates presentation we gave at the last meeting, which was a 90-second presentation because it's such a busy, but on the 7th, if I'm giving planning updates, which I think I will, that's what our intention every month is to update you on what grants are in the works. And so you can hear that.
And that's not just from the planning department, there are other items. I see the
We can expand it to, you know, everything else and so on.
He was looking at you, President Kuda,
I'm sorry.
on the 7th.
If planning updates is gonna be on the 7th.
Yeah, we were planning on it.
Is this during the regular meeting or council meeting of the whole?
You want to do a committee of the whole, right?
So, hey, I'm gonna be there on the 7th anyway. I think Ken and I could certainly present on this if you'd like in either meeting.
I think that'd be great if you
Yeah.
could. If you're already gonna be there, absolutely then,
Yeah.
please.
So take your pick if it's in the council meeting itself or committee.
If there's no, well, I think that's more up to, you know, the council presidents on where he wants you.
Right.
I do have to say, I really enjoyed having a department presentation last night. I thought that was awesome, well needed, went over very well. Built a lot of trust, I think, between council members and staff. We need to see more of that. Thank you very much for your time.
Good, thank you.
Moving on to our next item. This is a follow-up item from our prior meeting regarding the community survey that we think have all thought about. It might make a lot of sense for us to look into. Specifically, the last time that was done was in 2020, and these surveys sort of build upon each other. So you do them normally on a regular basis to try to get a sense of how you did year after year after year. It's been 4 to 5 years since the last one was done, and I feel like we're gonna lose our opportunity if we don't move forward and fund something like this for ourselves. This is the ETC survey done by the ETC Institute. I actually spoke to the director there that did the Cleveland Heights survey back in 2020. They have recently done a survey for Shaper. And they would love to be able to do a project for us. And the funding amount is, you know, somewhere between, you know, $15,000 and $40,000, depending on the amount of responses that they need to get. They believe that this is the kind of stuff that you cannot necessarily do over the internet. You actually have to do over the phone and talk to people. They sort of have their method. They do this all the time. It's less expensive if we don't have to, you know, redo all the survey questions, but it's kind of like you sort of ask the same questions year after year and possibly change them up, depending on, you know, the market. I also, you know, talked with them about, you know, trying to get resident satisfaction across just not the city, but, you know, because we're a larger city, by neighborhoods, and that's where the price differential is. So if you're like targeting maybe 4 areas or 5 areas, you know, not necessarily 5 times as much, but I mean, the real labor is someone going in and asking the actual questions. You know, I'd love to see us do something like this and fund it. You know, the mayor was very specific, was very emphatic about, you know, not being on the radar of the administration. I don't necessarily think this has to be a burden for the administration. We can really, you know, this is really, I think, a totally outsourced effort. I think we'd want to engage the administration if they want to be a part of it. I think we need to make sure, I mean, the mayor referred to this as, he was afraid it might be politicized. You know, we do have this new form of government. I would suggest at this point we stay away from any questions that are about the mayoral form of government. And we just stick to the resident satisfaction questions that have been asked in the past. What do you guys think?
How far are they going to depart from what they did the last time they did a survey? Or is it essentially gonna be the same thing?
I don't think we, or I certainly haven't gone that far. I think generally when they do an engagement, there is some time involved where they, look at what questions to update. I think there would have to be a little interaction with that. I think that's a decision that has to get made by us.
I don't believe there is anything political about the last survey that they did. And provided that they stuck to these core questions and the core methodology that they utilized, I don't know how anyone could claim that it was somehow political.
I would like to see it happen. I'm just so concerned about not having support from the administration. Do you have any insight into that?
I mean, the way to get around it is to do it next year. But I know that the administration is currently doing an internal survey that is for employees only.
360.
I mean, maybe, I don't know if they're calling it that, but I know who's doing it and that it's being done. The mayor told me that it's being done. But it's for the improvement of internal communications. In other words, I was led to believe that the results would be for that purpose.
I see.
But we're talking about a resident survey, and I don't look at it as that's not political at all. It just kind of tells us, actually, that's as the budget authority, we have to know this stuff. It's part of why you would move money here instead of there. We always have a finite amount of money, and we need to prioritize it.
Yes.
I don't believe there's any cooperation needed by the administration. We can hire them to do this. They're relying on residential surveys and information that they statistically obtain from public records to determine who the residents are that they want to issue a survey to. That information isn't coming from the city of Cleveland. They're pulling that from most likely the post office databases. I'm sitting here looking at the last survey they did in 2020.
How many total did they get to respond, does it say?
They received 452 to a random sample of households.
Sounds like they mailed it.
They mailed it, and then they followed up with email addresses. Now, I don't.
Favorable, the results?
For the most part, yes. I know satisfaction with city services, 89%, and they broke this down in neighborhoods. I'm sitting here looking, most of the results, code enforcement was way down.
Okay.
That was one of the lowest scores at 47%. And then transportation, that's down at 55%. Sidewalks, another negative point. But, parks and recreation, city communications, safety, forces, perceptions of the city.
EMS is on there?
Satisfaction with, yes.
Okay.
So,
Have you reached out at all to them?
I spoke to
Okay,
I
yeah.
spoke to the guy that managed the
Sorry,
project
yeah.
last year, or 5 years ago.
And the price that he mentioned to you, was that to do the same survey they did before?
Yes.
That seemed very
it was like,
Unbelievably reasonable to me.
What was the price?
I think his price was, 17 to 25, and then if we needed to have him come in to present it, that's a little extra. If they wanted to enlarge it and break things down more to neighborhoods, there'd be a little more on top of that. I can't imagine it being, I'm guessing at this point, 30,000. It's probably not that high.
We think we have that in our budget, don't we? Consult.
Yeah, we have that left over from last year, a lot more than that left over from last year.
Well, we'll have to see we could even adjust our budget to accommodate
that's
this.
what we would do.
I think it's a good thing. I'm gonna reach out to him and see if he can
Give us a proposal.
give us a proposal, talk to us at our next meeting. And I think I have enough information to get a proposal.
And I agree with Craig that if we keep the questions the same, then we have a better comparison.
Well, and it sort of gets away from, I just know whatever comes out of a council member's mouth is gonna say, oh, it was all political, we saw that last night, and even though that's not true. But we're gonna see that. So I think the issue here is we stick to the same questions unless there's some, I think that'll give us a good start. Then in a prior year, if we need to adjust, if we need to make adjustments, we can do another survey in another year. We're running close on time. There was this public hearing for deer management. There happens to be an ODNR and OSU deer management meeting for elected officials on the 15th of April. I have signed up for that. I think Gail has signed up for that. It was in an email that we received. But I'd love to be able to do that first. I'd love to be able to do that first before we have our hearing. What I'm thinking of is, doing the hearing on Tuesday the 29th. I've checked with Addie. That's a clear day on the schedule. That's a clear day in the calendar. This is contingent that all members of this committee can make it on the 29th.
Time?
Well, the hearing, I was gonna suggest between 6 and 8, but we can do between 5 and 7.
I'm fine.
Because it's a hearing, I think doing it at 5 o'clock may be too soon, but
Yeah.
I'd rather get it done.
I'm wide open, Jim, so whatever
They're
time you
available.
land on.
Craig, are you able to check your calendar now?
April,
29th.
I should be able to do it.
Okay, and that would be a 2-hour public hearing. On the 22nd, the week earlier, if we did a kind of a pre-meeting before that, and also see if I can get the gentleman to join us from the survey company, that would be a much shorter meeting. Can we do that on the 22nd?
There's also a combined meeting of Housing and Building and Planning and Development on the 22nd at 6 o'clock. Just got scheduled today. So that's a discussion about, I've forgotten.
It could be, I'm not sure.
What time is that meeting?
6.
Housing and Building and Planning and Development, that's at 6.
If we did this, if we're just,
Oh, it's
if we did it at 5:30 or 5 o'clock,
that would work for me.
This way we don't have the 10-2 meetings.
I think that meeting is at 10 o'clock, no? The combined meeting, or is it?
No,
Oh, no, that's right, it's after,
Yeah,
'Cause
so
it's
people can
Huntress,
come,
yeah.
yeah, because it's a public hearing as well. So 4:30, 5 o'clock on the 22nd for,
Well, if the meeting's at 6, I would say it'd either be at 5 or 5:30.
we have Addie send out an invitation, please.
Craig, can you do it the 22nd?
I can.
Great, okay. Okay, so I think we've got some times. It's 5:01. Is there any other business we need to talk about this evening? Okay, I'm gonna adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.